Hey adapters, I'm Doug Parsons. I'm a partner at Simpatico Studios, where we live stream conversations about complex business and social challenges with professionals like yourself who are working on the same issues. Our shows are live streamed in front of a global audience of your professional peers on simpatico.tv. I'm building a new type of online community for professionals like yourself on the Climate Adaptation channel. If you're a regular listener of my America Adapts podcast, I think you'll find that we're taking our conversations about important problems, policies, and solutions to the next level here. And if you're interested in being a guest, we'd love to hear from you. And now join us for this latest episode. Hey adapters, welcome back. Today our guest is Kenton Rogers. Kenton is a chartered forester and a Royal Geographical Society Fellow. He holds a master's in forest ecosystem management and was a contributing author on the UK National Ecosystem Assessment and the Springer Handbook on the Urban Forest. Recently, Kenton was the lead author for the Haynes Owners Workshop Manual on Trees. Ken and I will explore the concept of the urban forest and its importance regarding the social, economic, and environmental aspects of a community. Ken will discuss the roles of different stakeholders with green infrastructure and shares the challenges of maintaining and increasing the benefit of trees in urban areas. Hey Ken, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Doug.
Well, I'm checking in with my guests first before we jump into urban forest. How's COVID-19 impacting the work that you're doing?
It's been, there's been some big changes with the work. Fortunately, we've all continued to work here with the team here at Treeconomics, so that's been good. And work hasn't been too badly affected so far, but I think there will be changes to come. I mean, the government have put a lot of money into, assisting local authorities with getting them through the crisis. So I think, it's could be difficult times ahead, I think.
Right, so we're going to be talking about urban forests, but first off, you're the co-founder and CEO of Treeconomics. Who are you guys?
So Treeconomics, we're a small team, social enterprise, employee-owned, and essentially what we're all about is sustainable treescapes for everyone. And my background, I started out in forestry, doing traditional forestry, and then after a while moved into more urban forestry. And we're kind of always looking at trees in the context of hazard and risk, and always being asked, is my tree safe? And a lot of people, they're sort of managing their trees within that framework, the context of hazard and risk. And Treeconomics was formed really to look at it in a different way, looking at trees as assets and managing trees from a sort of benefits-based approach or perspective, sort of turning that on its head, because I think that's key to better urban forest management.
So was that a hard personal transition for you to focus, from natural sort of forest systems to urban forests? What was that for you?
And that came quite naturally, actually, because in the UK, after studying traditional forestry for so long, there wasn't as much work in traditional forestry, actually, and a lot of the work was more in the urban realm where trees meet people, because I guess that's where there's jobs for tree surgeons and arborists, which is where I started out when I transitioned. We were trimming trees, reducing trees, planting trees, that kind of thing.
Okay, it might seem obvious to people, but what is an urban forest?
Yeah, I guess to some people that can be sort of an oxymoron. How can an area be both urban and forest? But actually, if you look at the FAO guidelines on what constitutes a forest, which is sort of an area with over 10% contiguous tree cover, then actually a lot of our urban areas are forests, just by that definition. There's quite a few urban forests with 20-30% cover, actually, and more in the States. Some places have well over 30% tree cover. So it's kind of, and when you sort of take a step back and look at the landscape scale and look at the no longer is it the trees in the city. It's more like the city in the trees. When you sort of zoom out and look down, there's a lot more trees than a lot of people realize, I think, in our urban areas. And so the urban forest, is a thing, and it's the trees and all the green spaces and the shrubs and hedges within that urban area.
So I imagine if you look at the history of a city, most cities are quite old, especially over in your neck of the woods, that some cities did a great job of taking that, there were already trees there and you're building up and you're maintaining that tree cover that might have existed. But then some cities, they just leveled it all and then you have to kind of start over again. What's, I guess, more of your approach? Are you just replanting trees in areas that were just completely cut down? How does that work?
Yeah, and in the UK, there's been a long history of tree planting in urban areas as well. I mean, the Victorians, they really understood the benefits of trees, even if they didn't fully understand how that worked. They knew trees were good for things like filtering the pollutants. So that's why we've got a lot of London plane, Platanus hispanica and aceifolia in London. It's because the Victorians planted that, because they understood that it captured the pollutants. But that's a legacy now that we're benefiting from. And actually, London plane is one of the most populous trees in New York as well, planted around the same era.
So is it native? I mean, I'm not even that familiar with the tree. Is it native?
Yeah, it's not native to us in the UK or in the States. It's from Iran, further in the Caucasus, further east. But it's a fantastic urban tree because it tolerates the urban soils. It gets big and it's got a large leaf surface area, and that's what drives a lot of the tree benefits, like the air pollution removal. It's got a rough textured bark, and that captures particulates. It's got big leaves, and there's a lot of hairs on those leaves as well. So that they're ideal for urban areas, the London plane. But of course, since that Victorian times, not a lot of big stature trees are being planted anymore. And they're coming to an age now where they're sort of mature and they're starting to decline as a percentage of the population. And what we've been seeing is, big trees are being removed, and they're being replaced with kind of like, the lollipop trees. And they're nice too. They've got nice aesthetics to them. But what's happening is they're never going to get to that size. Their canopies aren't going to grow as large as those London planes. So the benefits won't be the same. There's not enough bigger trees in our urban areas, generally speaking.
So what are the challenges of growing an urban forest? And I as you bring these things up, I think it's almost on a city by city, based on your geography, but sort of like what you deal with. What are some of the main challenges?
I think that the main challenge to urban trees and urban forests is undervaluation. And that's why we're sort of advocating or pushing for this, or, preaching about this benefits-based approach to trees, because it's a shame we see it all too often that trees are just undervalued. I think the fact that they're so big, I think people tend to think they're sort of strong, resilient organisms, which they are, but also they're very vulnerable too. And I think that gets lost. I think people think trees can just be planted and they can be left to get on with it. And that's not the case, actually. They need a lot of maintenance and they need investment if they're going to succeed. And I think that's a shame that we've lost sight of that with these bigger trees coming down, being replaced by smaller trees that won't get to the right size, or trees that just aren't invested in. They're not given the proper maintenance programs. So there's a lot of initiatives that are based on tree numbers being planted in the ground. And that's kind of great for the politicians or for big headline figures, but actually it's probably better to plant one tree and see it through to maturity or independence in the landscape, rather than plant 100 or 1,000 trees and actually they're after the fanfare and we've planted X many trees, actually the important thing is to make sure that they're maintained.
There are a lot of stakeholders who support these urban forests, but it seems a lot of them have different sort of priorities. And how does that come into play with what you're doing? Some people just might want it for the aesthetic purposes. Other people might want it for the pollution purposes, and maybe someone doesn't want an exotic tree there. How does dealing with stakeholders kind of come into play?
Yeah, that's an important consideration, actually, to make sure you're planting the right trees and trees that are going to benefit people. And again, that it's important really to look at the site specifics and work with the community, but also work with the tree officer or the urban forester, who will have a good understanding of what tree will grow well in that particular locality. I mean, a lot of the work we do is kind of larger landscape scale, looking at bigger urban areas and sort of doing heat maps where we can overlay canopy cover and flooding and the air pollution and urban heat island effect. And we can create a heat map of, and these can be created, these heat maps of where is best to plant. But actually, that's not a shortcut to thinking. You still need people on the ground, an NGO, tree group, community group, or a tree officer to actually look at the site specifics. There's a lot of reflected light in our urban spaces. There's a lot of soil compaction and poor quality soils, and all these things need factoring in when planting a tree. Yeah, so it's important to match that to
So
people.
the cities that you're working with, and I'm assuming you're working with multiple cities and landscapes there in the United Kingdom, are there some really good examples that they're kind of doing it sort of comprehensively? They're looking at all these different things. Are they still figuring it out?
Yeah, there's a lot of good work still going on out there as well. And one of the more recent areas we've been working with, or municipalities, is one of the London boroughs, London Borough of Islington, and the tree officer there, John Ryan, has done a great job of assessing what he's got. Looking at the tree canopy cover and where is that? Where has he got tree cover? Because there's also things like environmental equity. So quite often you find trees are always in the richer neighbourhoods, and not so. There's always less cover in the poorer neighbourhoods or in the more industrial areas. So you've got to think about not only what you've got, but actually where could I plant more trees, on the assumption that you haven't got enough, which generally tends to be the case. We haven't got enough trees across a lot of our urban areas. Many are below 30% of canopy cover when looked down on from above, which is, minimum 30% is a good thing to strive for.
I've connected with the people in New York City, and the tree coverage is totally an environmental justice issue for them, and so that drives a lot of the planting and such. And so I imagine that factors into how you sort of identify areas.
Yeah, that's part of it, as well as where are the quick wins, where is there available space to plant trees, and can I plant them closer to a road to increase the air pollution effects? And then there's wider issues around, the hardiness of the trees in that particular region as well to look at. Yeah, there's quite a lot that goes into choosing a tree that's not only going to survive but actually thrive in its environment. And the urban environment is a harsh environment for trees to grow in. I mean, trees are essentially, in the main, they're gregarious forest organisms, and they're meant to grow together. That's how they've evolved. And our cities, they haven't been around very long, so there's fewer trees to choose from when you're planting in urban areas, because it's such a harsh environment, really.
All right, so I got a question from the community here from Toby. Give me a second to read this. Much focus is placed on limited specific benefits of urban canopy, e.g., urban heat island, cooling, beautification. There are so many more services and values. Do you think there's a role for managing certain large urban canopies similar to conventional forestry for harvesting? Longer term economic value potentially advance interest in building up urban forests for a 50 to 60-year service advantage. All right, nice question, Toby. Did you catch all that?
Yeah, that's a good one actually. So I think if I understand that right, that's asking about looking at how getting more product from the urban forest as well, and managing a bit more traditionally. And I don't think we're there yet in the UK, but it should be part of a fully ideal urban forestry program, is actually growing trees, and a given number of trees will need to be removed through, because trees do grow old and die, and in the urban environment there's a lot of people, so you don't want a lot of dead trees in areas where they do pose a risk. And also, people tend to plant, or trees tend to be planted close together, so they grow together, they help each other grow. But then in a traditional forest, you'd thin those trees on cycles every 7 or 8 years. You'd probably remove nearly 30% of those trees, but you don't lose canopy or biomass. That then moves into a smaller number of stems, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It can be quite an emotive subject, tree felling in urban areas.
Well, that's my first thought was that as you harvest, you're moving like controversy around the city, because everyone has their sort of loyalty to their canopy and their trees, and the notion is like, well, we were always intending to harvest these trees. It's just like, oh, little sort of neighborhood NIMBY bombs going off left and right. I sort of get it, but yeah, that people love their trees.
Yeah, and that it's an issue then of sort of making sure you invest in the outreach and the ongoing discussions, because when people understand what's happening, rather than one morning they wake up and they hear the chainsaws, that's what different. If you can demonstrate it's part of a managed program and let people know about that, then I think that helps. And we worked with a local, it was our pilot project actually, as Treeconomics in Tor Bay, and we measured all the ecosystem services of, not all the ecosystem services, but we measured the ecosystem services, some of the ecosystem services of Tor Bay's urban forest. And having that data on what you've got and where you've got it was really helpful in explaining to the public when trees needed to be felled, that actually, the urban forest is a continuum, and trees take a long time to grow. And fortunately, we were able to go into the library and find these really old pictures and show it before it had trees as well. So we could show that, these trees grow and then they're removed, but actually over here, there's other trees growing. And the landscape changes slowly over time. But of course, we don't see that in our human lifespans.
Well, I was wondering, and you sort of alluded to it too, with the temperatures and the role that urban forests have on like mitigating extreme heat and such. How has climate change and adapting to climate change started to kind of come into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's started to come in thinking about what trees to plant, because we're planting trees today that have got to cope well in the 2050 emission. There's going to be looks like we're going to get that medium to high emissions scenario 2050 and beyond, because 2050 isn't that far away now in tree terms. And so in the UK, there's been some work done around climate mapping, which has been done by the research agency of our government forestry commission, the Forest Research, and we've been able to use one of their tools to look at climate matching 2050 and looking at what tree species would grow well in future climate scenarios by matching it. So, for example, I mentioned Torbay, which is on the southwest coast of the UK, but that climate is matched to the Loire Valley in France. And so tree species which grow well there should grow well in Torbay with this computer model. And similarly, the trees in Glasgow in Scotland, they should really be looking at what trees grow well in Torbay to sort of climate proof their urban forest for the future and plant more trees that will be able to tolerate, more drier, hotter days.
Well, it seems like the whole argument about planting more trees to mitigate extreme temperatures would probably really be helpful to you. I mean, pollution, flood control, these are all sort of good selling points, but just I think people probably can get their heads around that the bigger the tree canopy, the cooler the urban area is. And so is that just part of your communication strategy?
Yeah, what we will work with communities and tree managers and academics, researchers. We'll put together projects that look at, first of all, looking at what is there, what tree species are there, how and in what proportions, not just tree numbers of stems, but also the canopy. And then we can, sorry, I sort of lost myself there, Doug. What was the question?
It was just the benefit of, trees and even communicating the issue of climate change, because we need to plant and increase our urban forest to sort of say it's going to get hotter. And it seems to me like a group like yours, it would just be a great selling point. Is like, that's why we need these trees. Look what's coming in the pipeline kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the projects we put together, by measuring the trees, you can then calculate some of the benefits they're delivering. And then that's what we go out with as reports, really. Yeah, showing what the trees are doing with regards to the.
Okay, no, that's good. And I got another question from Toby here. Toby's all over this urban forestry stuff. Also, what are the most economical approaches to assessing an entire city's urban canopy? LIDAR? Are there other technical solutions?
Yeah, I guess, yes, there are. And it depends on your budget. But I mean, it's really quite an exciting time now for urban forestry with technological advances. And, you have communities out there, they've got, with very little resources, they can use open source peer-reviewed tools like iTree, which you may have heard of. And that's free to use, open source. You can go online and a community can assess their canopy in maybe 4 hours, maybe a morning's work. And that will tell them, what percentage canopy cover they have. And actually in the States, it will give you some estimates of how much air pollution they remove and how much carbon they're storing and sequestering, and the attenuated, the stormwater they're attenuating and holding up in their canopies. And in this country, we don't tend to use LIDAR very much because it's really expensive. But I know in Europe, in Amsterdam, they have LIDAR'd all of their street trees, and that information is freely available. So that information can be harvested, and people are doing some cool stuff with that, looking at the composition of their urban forest.
It's my understanding too, with just the widespread use of drones, it's really opening up a lot of ways of looking at the urban forest.
Yeah, the aerial photography with drones is really quick, and also satellite imagery as well can be used. So at a larger urban forestry scale, you can get some 10-meter resolution canopy cover data, for free. But that's great for that city scale. But if you want to get down to neighborhood scale, then yeah, like you say, a drone would probably be better, because the satellite data is quite expensive when you get to finer resolutions. Yeah.
We're at the end of our episode here. This went by really quickly, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up with you. Like, what's next with you in Treeconomics, and what are you going to be doing?
We've got lots of things on. We're working on new tools to look at highlighting the benefits of trees. I mean, there's over sort of the CICES, the Common International Classification for Ecosystem Services, lists 90 ecosystem services or benefits to us as humans. Urban trees can probably fulfill around 20 of those benefits. And out of those, we can only really quantify 10. And then we can only really monetize 5 of those. So there's a lot of work yet to be done. Yeah.
Well, all right. This has been very enlightening, and we're going to end the episode now. But I want just you to stick around. We're going to get into just chatting. I think there's a couple more comments here, but yeah, thanks for coming on, and hopefully maybe that we can have a future conversation about maybe some case study work that you're doing and some of the future work that you're planning to do.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. So hold on just a sec.
Sure.